harmless negativity that's in this town sucks.
Well, that's a good way to start it, because at some point, and you can write this down if you'd like, it's a little Monday afternoon wisdom. You either do it or you don't. We can gnash our teeth, we can agonize, we can analyze, we can lament. But sooner or later, for any team in any sport, when it comes to the last 2 or 3 minutes of a ball game, you either make the plays or you don't. Minnesota Timberwolves continue to be on a path that seems almost, it's borderline inexplicable.
What do you mean?
Even with the changes, the trade, the injuries, if the game is close, we find a way to lose it. Now, you can argue that last night there were enough mitigating circumstances. It was competitive. It was hard fought. A lot of body blows were exchanged. We gave as good as we absorbed. But in the end, guess what? They hit 2 more shots. When we took those same shots, they went in and out. We can't close. We can't finish. And again, maybe you want to lean on the fact that we're down several starters. But throughout this season, we have not been particularly good at closing games. In fact, the stat I read over the weekend that got my attention was that in so-called clutch games, and I assume there's a working definition of what a clutch game is.
Yep.
If it's 2-possession game in the last minute, I don't know what, but I think we all can recognize it.
There's a number associated with it.
The only teams that have been worse at so-called Magic Johnson winning time, back in the day, that's what he called it, winning time. You got a pen? Because you're going to want this list.
I'm writing it down.
These are the only teams worse than us at winning time or in winning time. The Charlotte Hornets.
Okay.
The New Orleans Pelicans. The Toronto Raptors. The Washington Wizards. And the Utah Jazz. Or is it the Utah basketball team? No, that's the hockey team.
It's the hockey team for now,
It's still the Jazz, right?
Yes, they are.
So
the bottom 3 teams in the Eastern Conference and the bottom 2 teams in the Western Conference right now.
Awful. Awful, awful, awful. That's what those teams have in common. The Toronto Raptors are 18-39.
They beat us once.
They did, you're right. The Charlotte Hornets are 14-41. The Washington Wizards, who did beat us once, here are 9-47. Who else did I say? The Pels?
The Pels and the Jazz.
Pels are 14-43, and the Jazz are 14-42. You do the math on the number. I mean, this is there's no mystery here. And I don't know what you think, because we haven't talked in a while. I wondered. I thought you might miss that. But if it keeps happening as often as it's happening, it's not a mistake. It's not the refs. I don't think it's just injuries, although certainly injuries can reduce your margin for error. No, there's no question about that. But to me, it's got to be one of a couple of different things right now. But the biggest is, I think, flat out, there is too much responsibility in the hands of Anthony Edwards. And I know he's got to grow up at some point. He's not as young as he used to be. You want to be the superstar? That's part of the burden that you have to accept. But I think I do not think the Wolves are doing him any favors. And part of this is, again, personnel. He doesn't any longer have the closest thing to a number 2 that he did with Karl Anthony Towns a year ago. We know that. I know it feels like it's a broken record. Why lament it? Why keep bringing it up? Because it's not going to change. But I think he doesn't feel like he's got a partner in crime even though obviously Edwards is not a perimeter, I should say, Cat is not a perimeter player. He is still capable of, making plays and taking the pressure off in the last 2 minutes. Mike Conley has been at times ineffective, then he's been hurt, right? And so I think every game the head coach struggles with, is this a game I bring Conley back because of his wisdom and his experience and his cool, or is this a game where I can't afford to do that because I'm not getting enough out of him, or I'm getting something out of somebody else and I have to keep going there? The Anthony Edwards judgment is not good enough yet to have that much responsibility and to assume that he's going to make the right decisions. I'm maybe in the minority on this. I despise his shot selection on most nights. I do. I know he hits some of those setbacks, step back, threes, and I know he can make some shots where you go, well, you got to live with it because he's so good at it. But he's not balanced on a lot of these shots. They're not good shots. Watch, for example, compare and contrast the shooting approach and shooting styles and the balance between an Anthony Edwards and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
SGA.
Yeah. Now, I understand Johnny will immediately tell me, well, he's 4 years older and he's been around long. I get all that. But that's immaterial. Look how balanced he is. Look how measured he seems to be, and so willing, by the way. I don't know if he's going to be called on this yet, but he has a peculiar willingness to take mid-range jump shots. I'm surprised he hasn't gotten thrown out of the league yet. As it is, he's still supposed to be the leading MVP candidate, which surprises me. But I really believe that's what this team has to solve, whether it's, again, playing Conley more often, putting the ball back in his hands more, some other combination, whatever the case may be. But this ain't rocket science. And it was it 2 games ago? Which loss was it where Finchie brought this up after the game? And it might have been the Houston game where he said, look, he makes a lot of great decisions and a lot, but we still got decision issues towards the end of games. We do. Other teams, part of the reason other teams in this conference are better than we are is they look more like they know what they want to do at the ends of games. It doesn't look like, and sometimes it's just you hit the shot or you miss it. I get that. Yep. But I really think that's the number one deal that ails this club right now is he's not ready for this. I don't care. We're all excited about the video where he's the truth, and we're happy for all of the verbal nonsense and gymnastics that take place in the NBA about whether this is the guy or that's the face of the league or whoever it is. I just don't think he's, and I'm defending him to a degree because I'm saying I'm still not even sure that it's fair to him to expect that he's going to have that much basketball wisdom this early to make the right choices. I know his physical ability can sometimes render that moot, and he can just make something out of nothing, and you go, well, that didn't make any sense, but it went in, or that was a great drive to the basket. But I really think we're going to keep, no matter how healthy we get, I think we're going to keep pounding our head against the wall if we don't come up with a way where the ball is not constantly in his hands with 2 or 3 minutes to go. Go through the list of the number of breakdowns, turnovers, bad decisions, bad shots, forced shots, etc., that reduce the margin for error of a team that has played well enough again last night to win the ballgame.
Last night was a remarkable microcosm of the entire season. And the clutch thing, and Mike Breen, I was watching Breen. I was going back and forth between local and national last night because you're always curious what the national people are thinking. And Breen, the entire fourth quarter with Doris Burke is bringing up the clutch time
He's
stuff.
Been fed the stats, yeah.
And as that's going on, if you're just parachuting in, what happened last night for the Wolves offensively is what seems to happen every single time this does happen. The ball is moving around. Guys are getting shots. Naz is playing well again. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is playing well again, hitting shots. The ball's popping. Conley's in there. They're getting it all over the place. And then with like 6 minutes to go, all of a sudden, it's like we're slowing down to pull into the train station. Mm-hmm. The brakes get put on. Anthony starts dribbling a million miles a minute. Here comes the double. Where's the ball going to go? Where SGA gets doubled, right? They talked about it last night. And he made some tough shots in the double. But you know what else they did, I thought, really well is they moved it even in the clutch time. He didn't take every shot last night.
He did not.
He didn't take every single contested shot. It wasn't just about SGA's shot making, because that's...
No, who's the guy they got from the Bulls, the good defensive stalwart? He had at least 3 3-pointers in the fourth quarter, didn't he?
Caruso.
And several of those, I want to say, were in winning time as well. At least one of those.
They were. And every piece there, and again, that might go down to supporting cast, because we've talked about it.
Yeah.
To me, what changed the game wasn't that SGA came in and started going nuts. And obviously, Jalen Clark getting injured, that's going to hurt, because he was absolutely helping carry them really the entire game. So that's a buzzkill. Clark's been playing great. But it's like the rest of the Wolves don't know what to do either. Like Jaden McDaniels is trying to take a shot over Chet. Like, what are you thinking? In the middle of the lane. Block, bucket the other way. Then he misses another 3. Go the other way. Like, they always know every other role player. When we were trapping them, and it's A1, Day 1, we're trapping them. They get it to something called Hartenstein, who's a nice player for them.
Yes,
he's hammering it on people or kicking it to the corner for a wide open 3-pointer. But the ball is still moving. SGA's initiating a lot of it, and it's obviously going to be in his. He's going to be option 1, but the second it's not there, like, it's gone, and everybody else knows what they're supposed to do. The Wolves all season long haven't known what to do with it. It's just a lot of dribbling and a tough Ant shot. And he made some ridiculous shots again last night, but that is such a hard way to live.
Yeah, well, again, was it the Houston game where through 3 quarters he was the dominant player, and then the fourth quarter he was awful. And stuff gets forced. And as you say, it's not like SGA never forces a shot, but he doesn't force a lot of them. He's also, though, he's got the ability that I don't know anybody else has the ability he has in one regard, to create space in the mid-range. Ant cannot create space the way that SGA does. He is so much more efficient of a player, and he is further along. I'm sure that's some of it, too. It's not even fair to compare Ant to that, because, as I said, I'm actually trying to give Ant the benefit of the doubt and to say, we're asking, even if you believe you should get more out of him, at some point, don't you have the evidence to say, well, this isn't working this way? We are asking too much of him at this point. We know how gifted he is and how strong mentally he is and how he wants it all. But that doesn't mean he's ready for it all. And I don't know if there's a plan B that you can figure out on the fly. We'll see. We putting $1,000 in somebody's hand?
We are not. That'll be back in a few weeks.
Back in a few weeks. Okay, let's try to stay somewhat on schedule. I'll get to some texts that have come in, and I will give you the guest lineup, which will include a visit, Dateline Oklahoma City, from Jonny Athletic, who is tracking the Timberwolves. He is scheduled for 3:30.
Obviously we're putting 2 on the ball, and they went a little bit small. Played Caruso basically as a 5, and they were able to kind of squirt loose and knock some 3s down.
Got to take a trip, spend some good time.
Finchy last night after the game, and what's the moral of that story? Well, their superstar player gets doubled all of the time. Gets blitzed, as they say in the business, all of the time. And they work around it. They have a plan B. They might even have a plan C and plan D that allows them to survive, even if their strong MVP candidate, I think he's likely to win it this year, it is not able to get loose for the shot. So the idea that somehow Ant has to put up some stuff that no one else has to put up with is just nonsense. It's part of the deal. It's all part of the process. Now, I got a tweet from someone suggesting that who on the Wolves team is going to kick it down? Ant drives and kicks the ball out for a wide open 3. Nobody. That's why he's forced into bad shots late in games. I will just tell you, if you try to live by that mentality, the Wolves will never get better. I said he needs help. But I also think, like I said, he needs help not having to be, he's got to learn to play better off the bleeping ball. He just does. I don't care what anybody says. And the idea that, well, that excuses bad shots? No, it doesn't. It doesn't excuse it at all. That's too easy of an answer. That's not being honest with your best player, whether he's frustrated or not. I mean, Nas had a good look late where he scored it out top of the circle, and the three went in and out. That was a well-run play, and he didn't make the shot. That doesn't mean you don't make the pass. That doesn't mean that wasn't the right. You have to continue to make the right basketball play. We understand it's not, not all players are created equal offensively. So there are times you'd rather take Edwards take a more difficult shot than somebody else who's not very gifted offensively take a shot at all. But that doesn't explain this. That doesn't explain away some of the decision making that continues to be something of a problem. By the way, I mentioned Jonny Athletic. He's scheduled for 3:30 today. Axios' own Nick Halter is going to join us at 4:30. He's got an interesting proposal of a possible arena site for the Minnesota Timberwolves, if indeed, as we expect, well, I guess maybe we shouldn't expect, but we anticipate A-Rod and Lori, it'll be their baby sooner rather than later. And it's not a parcel of land that I think has been discussed before, but
has not been.
Halter's got, I think, an interesting proposal. He admits within the piece that there's some hurdles, but he also thinks there's some attractive aspects to it as well. We'll discuss that particular proposal and maybe talk some more downtown stuff with him. That's scheduled for 4:30. We are usually when we have Ode to a Dead Guy, there's only one. In this case, it's Ode to a Dead Guy today and Ode to a Dead Gal before this program is wrapped up at 6:30.
Are we rolling with McCallum today? I've got McCallum, too.
Well, my idea on McCallum was, you and I can talk about it, was more that if people missed it, me just retweeting a link that we create of it so that if people want to podcast it, but we can talk about what the best approach might be on that. You and I haven't had a chance to talk about the new HBO documentary. I don't know if you've seen it. We Beat the Dream Team. It is fascinating. And Jack McCallum is the authority, journalistically speaking, on the Dream Team. He wrote the definitive book on it, and it raises some really interesting questions about the U.S. select team in a scrimmage, brought in for a scrimmage, first or second day of practice in La Jolla for the Dream Team in 92, knocking off in that scrimmage, shocking the Dream Team. And decades later, it has elicited great controversy about whether they actually did beat them or whether Chuck Daly, the master psychologist, orchestrated all of it. So that'll be part of the discussion today. And if you missed it, it was a really good conversation with McCallum on yesterday's program. 612 guy, he's the only one on ball who can create. Who's saying that's not the case? The issue is, I'll tell 612 guy again, and he can pound his head against the wall if he wants or not. The issue is, what explains the bad stats that have us better in clutch time than only 5 of the worst teams literally in the NBA? Charlotte, New Orleans, Toronto, Washington, and Utah. And some of it is bad decision-making. Things are breaking down late. Balls going off somebody's knee out of bounds. And part of, I think, what is ailing this club is they're putting too much responsibility in Edwards' hands. And I'm not sure he's ready for that level. He's still really not a point guard. I understand why Conley has been in and out. He has not played as well this year. But the job of the head coach is to come up with other plans, alternative ideas of who we throw out there and say, all right, you may have to handle the ball a little bit more. And you may have to play off the ball a little bit more. Maybe you even get a less contested outside shot. Most of his outside shots are incredibly contested and difficult and challenging. So I'm not putting that on him. I'm putting that on the system, and this team has to come up with better alternatives. And I'll say again, there are a lot of people hurt, but this has been an ongoing issue this entire season. Almost from start to finish.
I just wish it went quicker. It just always seems like
Well, because that's when he gets into pounding the ball.
Yeah,
more.
that's
he
what
just does.
my biggest frustration, and you can see it just happening over and over again. Going all the way back to the beginning of the season, there were times where some other guys had it going, and the pace that the team was playing with was outstanding, and they were guarding and they were defending, and then it just gets into dribble mode. And I get it. Part of that is probably he's trying to see how they're defending him, because I'm sure there's 3 or 4 guys, at least in his vicinity,
right? At
least to be able to get to him. But that also goes to what you were saying. Let's try to do something a little bit easier or quicker, because it seems like what we do is he passes to Conley and Conley gives it right back to him.
Yes.
Like, that's the way we move the defense.
That's it.
That's great. But I feel like I watch other teams do different things, and every player is different. And SGA is not a perfect example in terms of skill set, because he is different. But it just seems so much cleaner.
It is.
With how the ball was moving around last night for them, and everybody knew exactly what they were supposed to do. And part of the problem is you don't know who's, like, we always say Jaden McDaniels is always like the X factor, right? If he's hitting his corner threes, the Wolves are unbeatable.
Right.
Because that shot is always available to him. Even Jim Pete said it earlier in the year. And it seems like he really always will find Jaden in the corner for that corner three. And I'm thinking that's because he's open for a reason. Teams are willing to live with the fact that Jaden McDaniels might beat you. So, but it seems like everything just gets so slowed down in the final 4 or 5 minutes. And I don't think that helps anybody.
No.
Ant especially.
No, I don't know. I think we're still loath to run very many plays. I just don't think that's something Finch loves to do either. And maybe other teams don't either, but it does look cleaner. Everything obviously looks better when shots go in, right?
Yep.
I mean, if it's a couple of those outside shots that Oklahoma City, others than other players than SGA, those shots don't go in, that doesn't look as clean, right? I get that's a part of it. But it doesn't look as easy. It doesn't look as orchestrated. And it just feels like towards the end, we're like, well, we're hoping a prayer, and we hope he's going to force a couple shots, but he can make a lot of those. Can he get to the free throw line? Which I still, they went to the free throw line a decent amount, I think, last night. Hit a bunch of their free. I think they missed only one free throw all night. And we've been down that road as
27 to 28.
Yeah,
and Ant was there 10 times.
And he was there, and that's a great number for him. That's a number he should be at often, I think, and isn't. That's another issue. Jonny Athletic, Dateline, Okie City. He is tracking the Wolves. We'll catch up with him, get his reaction to what we were talking about, what took place last night, and I guess most important now is what the injury schedule looks like for the players still out for your Minnesota Timberwolves. Who's coming back and how quickly? And all of that and more with Johnny when we come back. Johnny will be checking in with us from Okie City in just a couple of minutes. Nick Halter, Axios, will join at 4:30 with an interesting Wolves Arena proposal. And we have Ode to a Dead Guy before we're done. We have Ode to a Dead Gal before we are done as well. Let's squeeze in while we're waiting for Johnny a very quick.
This is the end, my only friend, the end.
Direct quote from your guy, Guardsy. Edward R. Martin Jr., United States Attorney, District of Columbia. As President Trump's lawyers, we are proud to fight to protect his leadership as our president, and we are vigilant in standing against entities like the AP that refuse to put America first.
Where are we, America?
Thank God for community notes. This one notes, the DOJ is not the personal law firm of the president. The Attorney General represents the United States in legal matters generally and gives advice and opinions to the president and to the heads of the executive departments of the government when so requested. Who knew that we would be saluting on Elon Musk's Twitter a community note, readers added context note. I don't know how long it'll stay up. I'm actually surprised it has stayed up as long as it has. But there you have it. A U.S. attorney really telling us all we need to know about how this country is being run and who it's being run for at this point. So that in effect, if you're the group who says, well, yeah, it's turnabout. Turnabout's fair play, right? Those U.S. attorneys used to be parrots for the Democrats. So you make your case by replacing them with attorneys who are parrots for the current president? God bless you. God bless America. And what did you do yesterday? You can't even answer the question, can you?
I can't, nor do I want to.
Yeah, you probably don't want to.
Nor do I feel like I need to.
Remarkable.
I'll email it to you.
Please do. Bradshaw and Brian KFAN text line is wide open. If you have questions for Johnny K, Jonny Athletic, 64686. He is, I think his flight got a little bit delayed, and he was in an Uber, and he was going to try to force the beginning of the conversation on time in the Uber, but apparently it's a little loud in there. He didn't want to make a big issue with the driver. I just figured
I didn't want to put him in a tough position of having to ask the Uber driver to turn his music down.
That makes sense.
You don't need Johnny K in a compromised position. That's not good for anybody. I want him to be fast, play fast when he's with you.
651 guy, Jordan did not win until he was 27. Don't do this. Please stop doing this. Please. Please. Stop. Stop comparing. Stop it. It's not going to get you anywhere. It's not even fair to Anthony Edwards. He's not Michael Jordan. He will never be Michael Jordan. That doesn't mean he can't be one of the greatest players who ever lived. But go back and just watch, at whatever age you want, college, go back and watch footage of Michael Jordan, fundamentally speaking, from a balance standpoint, from a finishing standpoint. One of the great ironies about Anthony Edwards, despite his numbers, is he is not a great finisher. And statistically, he's not. So, again, don't. There's better ways to make whatever point you're trying to make. No one is, and the irony again here is people think I'm attacking Anthony Edwards. I'm actually doing the opposite. I'm trying to give Anthony Edwards a break and saying, you've got to stop pretending he's ready for all of this responsibility. And I would even say, if that means you have to put somebody on the court who isn't great with him, you still have to consider it. Or different combinations, I still think you have to find a way, because you can tell how it's working against him at the ends of games on many occasions. And so what he ends up doing is he gets frustrated, and then he just says, all right, I'll retreat, I'll do a fade.
Yep. And
it's a shot I can make maybe 4 out of 10, and I'll take my chances that this will be the one, correct? I mean, and that's, I just don't think that's very useful for this club right now. And there's limited options, I get that, but I really feel that's a big part of what continues to ail the club when it comes to, I mean, we're in almost every game, right? That's the whole point.
Had 1 million clutch games this year.
1 million clutch games, and you win 5 more of them. And obviously you're in a different position. As it is, right now I think we're in the play-in, correct?
Yeah, we're the 7.
We're number 7.
We're a game back of the Clippers, which is also too bad because the Clippers lost yesterday. And again, beating OKC is always going to be a tough putt. It's going to be a tough ask.
Right.
But had you beaten them, you would have slid up and at least been in a tie. I don't know what the percentages would be. Like you'd at least be in that top 6 somehow.
Correct. And as I understand it, right now we're in a meat grinder part of our schedule the rest of the way. But then after we clear this meat grinder part, I believe our schedule is considered like the first or second easiest the rest of the way, which means as you get healthier, there still might be an opportunity to move up in the standings. I'm not, as we bring Johnny into the conversation via the Connecticut Water Systems Hotline, Dayline, Oklahoma City. Johnny, I was just saying, I'm not ruling out the ability to potentially move up in the standings as the schedule gets softer again and as this team gets healthier. But I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to care about any of that if this team does not figure out how to play at the ends of ball games. Because in all honesty, what are we fighting over? What are we obsessing over? What do we care about how much healthier they get if they do not do a better job finishing ball games. So I can't put it all on who's hurt right now because we've seen it pretty much throughout this season. We continually see other teams that seem able to continue to run what they want to run with fewer turnovers down the stretch of games. And that to me is what that's the challenge for Finchie the rest of the way. What do you think?
Yeah, totally, Dan. I mean, that's the existential crisis that is facing this team right now, because if you want to be a human solar panel, and if you want to look at the bright side of things, they are literally in every game. Every single game, they never get blown out, except for the one rare occasion here or there, Cleveland, a few others. But they are in every single one of these games. And so, you figure if some things click into place, then you can turn things around, you can get on a run, and you can really have something that's potentially special here. But they do have to figure that out. Now, certainly, I think it will be easier for them to close games when Dante DiVincenzo is healthy. If you have the option of Julius Randle on a good night, I think that helps things for you and all that. But certainly, I think the biggest thing is that Anthony Edwards has to mature and figure out his decision-making process in those times. And Chris Finch is going to have a heck of a challenge figuring out what lineups he needs to play on a certain night. He has not been great at that for much of the season. But yes, that's the big thing facing this team right now.
So, it's interesting because one of the items I got into much earlier in the program is I believe Edwards has too much responsibility right now.
Yeah.
And I don't even think it's fair to him because he's not ready for it. Now maybe someday he will be, and I know some of this is out of necessity, but I have to believe at some point these guys have to get in a room as a group and say, even if we are playing lesser players, even if we are playing players that have some issues, we have to find a way to lessen the burden of having him, to expect him to score late, facilitate late, set everything up late, because I don't think he's ready for it yet.
I agree with you, Dan. I think that it's a double-edged sword here for Ant. Number one is, I don't think from a maturity, understanding the game standpoint, he is there yet in reading what is needed and required in a certain moment there always. When he is knocking down those crazy contested shots, it looks great. Like, that's awesome, super fun, but that's not a repeatable recipe for success. So asking him to do that at this stage of his career seems to be a lot for him. On the other hand, like if you take the Houston game, for example, yeah, he took a lot of bad shots, but you know what else happened? There were 3 different times where he drove into the lane, had the defense collapse, made a perfect kick out to a wide open Jaden McDaniels for 3, or a wide open Mike Conley for 3, and they missed. And so when he sees that happen over and over again, I understand why he feels like, hey, I'm the best scorer on this team. I got to do this myself. But he does have to do a better job of trusting his teammates. I think they need to get Naz Reid more involved.
Yep.
I do think when Randall comes back, he will help in that regard in terms of veteran decision maker, offensive hub, playmaker guy. But it's been too much for Anthony right now, and part of that is the teammates around him, but part of that is just his development as a player as well.
So, when Gargi and I were talking about this earlier, I talked a lot again about I still feel like relative inability that Edwards has to play off the ball. And I sometimes think the Wolves define, we do that sometimes, as what Gargi brought up, which was Edwards has the ball, passes it to Conley. Conley takes one dribble and passes it right back to him. That's not getting him off the ball. And I'm wondering, is it that he has not mastered, he being Edwards, the craft of playing off screens, of cutting in ways that give him opportunities, either going to the basket or even hitting an open mid-range shot or an outside shot, that's part of the challenge here, is that they want him to do more of that, but that they just don't think he has mastered that. Where is he in that part of his development?
Yeah, I think that is one thing that is lacking in his game right now, is his ability to come off the ball. I'll tell you, I think it was the Houston game again. Naz Reid has the ball on the wing. Edwards cuts to the basket and gets into the paint, and Naz gives him a perfect bounce pass. He catches it and dunks it. And that is the kind of routine play that we see all of the time in regular. Sorry about this. This is Oklahoma City. We're going crazy out here.
Problem.
But that is the kind of routine play that we see in the NBA all the time with star players, that to lighten their load and so that they don't have to create everything themselves, you get them moving off the ball. Now, there are players that are great at it, like Steph Curry.
Yeah.
There are players that are not as great at it, but Ant is almost non-existent in that area yet. And that's, again, another thing that he can mature at. Right now, basically, their one antidote is what you guys said, is he'll come up with the ball, he'll draw the double, he'll throw it to Conley, and then Conley will throw it right back to him. And that's a way of neutralizing the double team. But that still is then, okay, and it's all on your shoulders. You're one-on-one, your ISO, make something happen that way. And that's just a hard way to make a living. But right now, he is not polished at all in terms of backdoor cuts, coming off of screens and just getting open catch and shoot jumpers. That's not his game. And that's another thing that he will have to continue to work on this year, next summer, and going forward if he's going to really make the leap from all-star to, the first-team All-NBA type of a player.
Is Rudy, what's Rudy's status for tonight?
So he is out tonight, still has a bad back, a little concerning because he came back from vacation from the All-Star break feeling good. And then in the practice before the Houston game last Thursday, he aggravated it again. And so, generally speaking, back spasms can last a week or 2 weeks, and then you can usually come back and be fine. But I do think it is a little bit concerning that he had it. They kind of went away, and then they came back so quickly. So when he comes back, I'm not exactly sure. Right now, I wouldn't be surprised, Dan, if we saw Julius Randle for sure, and maybe even Dante DiVincenzo before we see Rudy again.
So is the early plan on Randle that we're going to immediately insert him back into the starting lineup, or is it possible they like Naz enough as a starter that they ease him back and justify it on the basis of, well, you're coming off injury, so we're going to try to bring you back slow? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's the major question that I really want to see answered. We haven't talked to Finch about it yet because Randle has not yet been cleared. And so it would be easy for him to just pawn it off and say, we'll deal with it later. But how Chris Finch handles the Randle reacclimation and whether he's in the starting lineup or comes off of the bench, that's going to be critical to them going down the stretch. Right now, Naz Reid is playing at such a high level, and he's doing so many things for them, both at center and at power forward. You can see that Ant feels like he has more room to operate when Naz is out there. He is getting to the line more. He is getting to the paint and the rim more, even if he isn't always making those shots. Those opportunities are coming at a much higher rate for Anthony Edwards, and it's because Naz Reid has been shooting like 40+% from three since January 1st. I mean, he's a knockdown three-point shooter. He creates his own shot, and oh, by the way, he's also rebounding at a high level. He's protecting the rim. He's doing everything you can possibly ask of him. So I will be highly interested to see what they do when Randle is back because there are some politics that are involved in that.
Yes.
But also there's just an undeniable thing that, hey, things look good with Naz Reid right now.
So I heard Jim Peterson earlier today, who was on Sirius XM, and I think I'm quoting him accurately, that he felt that maybe DiVincenzo, before he got hurt, had become the second most important player to whatever solution, whatever better place the Wolves are trying to get to on the other side. It's been so long since he's been out, I almost have forgotten about him. So refresh my memory on how he was playing before he came back, and what your feeling is regarding his importance, especially as maybe a guy who, at the end of games, can handle the ball some as well, where Ant is not being asked to score and facilitate.
Yeah, I think that when he comes back, and of course there will be an acclimation period after being out for a while, but I think what the Timberwolves are most excited about is really on two fronts for DiVincenzo, because when he was playing and just before he was injured, he had really reached peak DiVincenzo. He had struggled at the start of the season to acclimate himself to this team and figure out find his place. Is he a two guard? Is he a one? Is he coming off the bench? Is he starting? But in those games he was starting prior to the injury, he was making plays for others. He was handling the ball well enough that it wasn't a problem that they didn't have a natural point guard out there with Anthony Edwards in the starting lineup. But he also he is a volume 3-point shooter. Like, he gets out there and he jacks them and they go in. And so that dimension breathes space into the offense. He is a guy who looks very comfortable taking clutch shots and making them. He's done it for the Knicks in big situations, whereas you see right now, Dan, now with the way things are and the injuries and all those things, Jaden McDaniels has to be a clutch offensive guy. He's just not that. He's had a really nice run here, but they're asking him to do too much from an offensive standpoint. I think DiVincenzo fits into that role much, much better. And the final part of the equation is that DiVincenzo really guards. He is a big one, and he really defends well on the perimeter. And so there is we've seen Mike Conley struggle to defend bigger players, both against Oklahoma City and Houston these last couple of games. And DiVincenzo, I think, stands up to the bigger guards and the bigger perimeter guys much better defensively than Mike Conley does. And so you just have a more dynamic element on both ends of the floor. And I agree with Jim Pete that when he comes back, he's the biggest X factor. We'll see what happens with Randall. We'll see what happens with Rudy, but getting DiVincenzo back and healthy and playing like he was before the injury would be just an enormous lift for these guys down the stretch.
All right, so we've seen several young players have their moments out of necessity, right, because of the injuries. Where does Jalen Clark fit in? Is he healthy enough to go again tonight? And so what's his immediate future and his future when some of these injured players come back? Is there still room for some of the kids?
Yeah. So, first of all, he's listed as questionable tonight. The very notable thing on that is he's listed as questionable with neck pain, which means that he has not been diagnosed with a concussion, which is great.
Oh, that's good. Yeah,
because if you go into the concussion protocol, you're out for several games and you got to deal with all of that. So I think he's probably going to try to go, depending on how stiff the neck is. But last night, the game fell apart when he went out. He was defending Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at such a great level, making him work, make it hard for him to get to his spots, and just throwing him off, just like he did in the game right before the All-Star break. And on top of it all, he was 6 for 6 from the field, 2 for 2 from 3, just really helping offensively. And so he has kind of come out of nowhere in this group of young guys. When you started the season, you probably said you're most excited about Dillingham. You really like what you could have with Shannon. Leonard Miller then actually, and Luka Garza, I think, were both above Jalen Clark on the pecking order. And then Clark has just exploded onto the scene. And so I actually think, Dan, that when all these guys are healthy and back, he actually has the best chance of staying in the rotation of all of the young guys because he has earned Chris Finch's trust from a defensive standpoint. That is the clear key to Chris Finch's heart. And not only has he done that, but he plays a smart offensive game. He doesn't turn the ball over. He makes good decisions. He shoots when he's supposed to. He passes when he's supposed to. And so I think that he is really solidifying himself as not just a big part of what they have right now, but even going into the future over the next few years. They love Jalen Clark and they love what he's bringing, and he's been terrific for them. You're
in Oklahoma City tracking Wolves OKC, the rematch tonight. It's interesting to me. I mean, Oklahoma City, when you watch them, they do seem beautifully put together. Their record is, of course, the best. Just as how they finished, I think, last season, ultimately as well. But for me, there's always this nagging deal of, and I'm not even sure if it's fair to the team, that until they make a sustained playoff run, I'm not going to totally believe that they're as unbeatable as I'm hearing from a lot of the national wonks. So what's your current, how do you size up the Thunder at this point?
Yeah, I think that the questions about them are appropriate until they prove otherwise. That said, in just speaking specifically in this regular season, they are historically good. Their net rating, their defensive efficiency is they're 4.5 points per 100 possessions better than the second place defense, which is like the best in 30 years, like the biggest gap in 30 years. Like they are so good from a competitive level, from an execution standpoint. They always get the right shots. Everyone knows their role. They're incredibly well coached. They have everything defined. No one is trying to do more than they are supposed to do. And so from that discipline and that focus standpoint, they're just an incredible monster in the regular season because they always play hard and they always do what they're supposed to do. What will be intriguing in the playoffs is when you get into a series, what if they face LeBron and Luka? Or what if they face Jokic? Like, they're going to run up against people who are battle tested, and until they show that they can break through, you do wonder about, are they too young? Do they have enough? Do they have a true number 2 guy next to Shea to help them if he has a rough night? There are going to be those legitimate questions. That said, they're terrific right now, and I didn't think of that loss last night was anything to be disappointed in. I thought they battled really hard, and they're fantastic. So I do want to see them topple a few dragons in the playoffs first, but they're really, really good, man.
Have fun tonight in Okie City. We will read you tomorrow, and thanks. We'll talk soon.
All right, the gun belt's tight. Thanks, Dan.
Gotta be. Thank you. That is John Krasinski, Jonny Athletic, brought to you by our good friends at RBC Wealth Management. That is RBC Wealth Management, fine sponsor of the Jonny Athletic segment. As I mentioned, we'll about a half hour or so, we'll chat with Nick Halter from Axios, who knows from a business standpoint, downtown Minneapolis about as well as anybody. And he has an interesting proposal that he laid out this morning regarding potentially the site of a new Minnesota Timberwolves arena, if it indeed comes to that. And in addition, when we come back, I mentioned we've got Ode to a Dead Gal. We also have Ode to a Dead Guy. That's coming up.